I let my younger brother sleep in my house because he said he just needed a few weeks to get back on his feet. On a Tuesday afternoon, between student counseling sessions, my phone buzzed with a photo of an envelope from the U.S. Postal Service, addressed to me, stamped Notice of Default. I laughed, standing in the school parking lot, because my mortgage was paid. What felt odd was the escrow appointment listed for the next morning. By the time I realized why my mailbox camera had been unplugged, everything I trusted was already in motion. I let my younger brother sleep in my house because he said he only needed a few weeks to get back on his feet. That was the price, I thought. A couch, a spare key, a little patience. Nothing that could really cost me anything permanent. On a Tuesday afternoon in late August, I was standing in the parking lot behind my high school, the Arizona sun pressing down so hard the asphalt looked soft. The last bell had rung 10 minutes earlier. Kids were spilling out in clusters, backpacks slung low, voices loud, careless. I had just finished a meeting with a sophomore who was failing 3 classes and pretending he did not care. My job as a school counselor meant I spent most of my day telling teenagers that one bad semester did not define their whole future. I believed that. I still do. My phone buzzed in my hand. I glanced down, expecting an email from a parent or a calendar reminder I had forgotten to snooze. Instead, it was a notification from USPS Informed Delivery, a scanned image of an envelope. My name was printed across the front in block letters. My address was correct. The return address was a bank I recognized. Stamped in red, slightly crooked, were the words, Notice of Default. I actually smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was obviously a mistake. My mortgage was on autopay. I checked it obsessively, the way some people check the stove before leaving the house. I had bought that home 8 years earlier, a single-story place on a quiet street in Phoenix, where the yards all looked the same and the neighbors waved without asking questions. I had never missed a payment. Not once. I slipped my phone into my bag and unlocked my car. The steering wheel was hot enough to sting my palms. I turned the air conditioning on full blast and let it roar while I pulled out of the lot. Traffic on Camelback Road crawled the way it always did at that hour. A delivery truck stalled at a green light. Someone leaned on their horn. It all felt normal. Too normal. At a red light, I pulled my phone back out and opened my banking app. Mortgage balance. Paid. Next payment scheduled. I scrolled slower this time, just to be sure. Everything was clean. I exhaled, long and slow. The light turned green. I drove the rest of the way home thinking about what to make for dinner, whether I had enough energy to go for a walk before sunset, whether Evan would be awake when I got back. He had been sleeping late lately, blaming the heat, the job search, the stress. I had stopped asking follow-up questions. When I turned onto my street, the palm trees at the entrance rattled softly in the wind. My house sat halfway down the block, beige stucco, brown tile roof, nothing special. I parked in the driveway and noticed, vaguely, that the mailbox door was hanging slightly open. Inside, the house was quiet. The air smelled faintly of coffee and something fried. Evan's shoes were by the door, not lined up, just kicked off. His backpack was slumped against the wall. I dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl by the entryway and walked straight to the kitchen. On the counter was a stack of mail, grocery coupons, a utility flyer, an envelope from the HOA. No notice of default. "Evan?" I called. "In here," he answered, his voice muffled from the living room. He was stretched out on the couch, one arm over his eyes, phone balanced on his chest. He looked relaxed, too relaxed for someone who was supposed to be scrambling to rebuild his life. "Did you bring the mail in?" I asked. "Yeah," he said without moving. "Just now. Did you see anything weird?" He lifted his arm and looked at me, squinting. "Like what?" "Never mind," I said. "Probably nothing." I went to my bedroom and changed out of my work clothes. As I was folding my blouse, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. Subject line: Escrow appointment confirmation. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The email was polite, professional. "Thank you for choosing us. Your signing is scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. Please bring a valid photo ID." My name appeared twice, Once as the seller, I read it again, slower. Then a third time. I did not own any other property. I was not selling my house. I had not spoken to a realtor. I had not signed anything. I had not even thought about moving. I walked back into the living room, the phone still open in my hand. "Evan," I said, keeping my voice even. "Did you use my computer today?" He glanced at the screen, then back at me. "No. Why? Did anyone come by the house?" "No." "Did you sign for anything?" He frowned, as if genuinely confused. "No, Claire. What's going on?" I almost told him, almost showed him the email. Almost laughed it off and said something stupid like, "Can you believe this scam?" Instead, I nodded. Nothing. Just work stuff. I went back to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking just enough that I noticed. The sound of the refrigerator humming felt too loud. The house felt smaller than it had an hour earlier. I opened my laptop and logged into the county recorder's website. I had been a homeowner long enough to know where to look, even if I had never needed to before. I typed in my name, hit search. At first, nothing came up. Then I adjusted the date range. A new record appeared. I stared at the screen, reading the same line over and over until the words lost their meaning. A document had been recorded against my property less than 2 weeks ago. It included my name. It included my address. It included a document number I did not recognize. I clicked on the preview. The file took a second to load. When it did, I felt my stomach drop so hard it was almost physical, like missing a step on the stairs. There was my name. Typed. Clean. Correct. There was a signature that looked enough like mine that I understood immediately how this could happen. There was a notary stamp. There was a date. What there was not was my memory of ever being there. From the living room, Evan laughed at something on his phone. The sound carried down the hall, casual, unbothered. I closed the laptop slowly and rested my palms flat on the desk, breathing through my nose the way I taught anxious students to do. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a clerical error, a misunderstanding, something that would make sense once I spoke to the right person. But standing there, in my own bedroom, in the house I had paid for one paycheck at a time, I felt something shift, a quiet, unsettling awareness that whatever this was, it had not started today. Today was just when I noticed. I picked up my phone again and opened the mailbox camera app. The screen loaded, then froze. No live feed, no recent clips, just a spinning circle where yesterday should have been. In the kitchen, Evan called my name. "Hey, what's for dinner?" I looked at the door, at the hallway, at the familiar shape of my life arranged exactly the way I had left it that morning. "I don't know yet," I said. And for the first time since he had moved in, I realized I had invited someone into my home without knowing what doors he might open while I was at work, telling other people that their future was still safe. I did not sleep that night, not really. I lay in bed, listening to the ceiling fan tick softly as it spun, counting rotations the way I used to count sheep as a kid. Evan's door stayed closed. At some point after midnight, I heard him get up, the faint creak of the hallway floorboard, the refrigerator opening and closing. I kept my eyes shut. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I was imagining patterns because I was scared. At 5:30, my alarm went off. I turned it off before it could ring twice. The sky outside my window was still dark, the kind of purple blue that only exists for a few minutes before the sun burns it away. I got up, showered, dressed, moved through my morning routine like muscle memory. Coffee, toast, keys. Evan was still asleep when I left, or pretending to be. I did not check. The drive to school felt longer than usual. Every red light felt personal. Every billboard advertising debt relief or fast cash made my jaw tighten. By the time I parked, my head was already full of questions with no safe place to land. Work helped, at first. It always did. Students came in with schedules to fix. Parents called about missed assignments. A teacher needed help de-escalating a fight between two juniors who had been friends since kindergarten and now could not look at each other. Real problems. Problems I knew how to handle. Around 10, I sat across from a freshman named Lily, who kept twisting the strings of her hoodie until her fingers turned white. She was terrified she was going to fail algebra and ruin her life. I leaned forward, lowered my voice, and told her what I told so many kids. "One class doesn't define you," I said. "You don't lose everything because of one mistake." The words hung between us, steady and familiar. I nodded as she nodded, and for a moment, I believed them again. At lunch, I closed my office door and opened my laptop. I pulled up the county recorder site, the escrow email, the USPS notification. I took screenshots of everything, saved them in a folder labeled Home. It felt overly cautious, almost dramatic, but my chest loosened a little with each file I saved. I called the number listed in the escrow email. A woman answered with a bright, practiced voice. I gave her my name. There was a pause, a clicking of keys. "Yes, Miss Morgan," she said. "We have you scheduled for tomorrow morning." "I didn't schedule anything," I replied. I kept my voice calm on purpose. "Can you tell me who did?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm sorry," she said. "I can't disclose that information without verifying." "I'm the homeowner," I said, "and I'm telling you I did not authorize this." Her tone shifted, just slightly. "Let me put you on hold." The hold music was tinny and repetitive. I stared at the wall where a college acceptance poster hung crooked, corners curling. After 2 minutes, she came back. "All I can say is that the paperwork we received was complete and notarized," she said. "If you believe there's been a mistake, you may want to consult an attorney." A mistake. That was the word people used when they did not want to say fraud. I hung up and sat there for a long time, hands folded on my desk, listening to the muffled sounds of the hallway outside my door. Laughter. Lockers slamming. Life going on. I thought about Evan. About the way my mother's voice had sounded on the phone 3 months earlier, tired and embarrassed. "He just needs a little help," she had said. "You're good at that, Claire." She was right. I was good at helping. I had always been the responsible one, the planner, the fixer. Evan was my younger brother by 6 years. Same mother, different fathers, different lives. Where I had been cautious, he had been impulsive. Where I had followed rules, he had treated them like suggestions. When he was 16, I had covered for him when he skipped school. When he was 22, I had lent him money for rent he promised to pay back. When he was 25, I had let him crash on my couch after another job fell through. This time, I had told myself, it was different. He had looked genuinely shaken when he showed up at my door with a duffel bag and nowhere else to go. He had hugged me too tightly and said, "I just need time. I swear." I believed him, because believing him was easier than saying no. That evening, I came home early. Evan was in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone, a takeout container open in front of him. "Hey," he said, "you're home early." "Long day," I replied. I set my bag down and leaned against the counter. "Did anyone come by the house today?" He shrugged. "Just the mailman." 80. "Did you check the mailbox camera?" He glanced up, then back at his phone. "I think it's been glitchy." That was new. He had never mentioned the camera before. "Glitchy how?" I asked. "I don't know. It wasn't working this morning." I nodded. "Okay." I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall, letting the silence stretch. Part of me wanted to confront him, demand answers, force the truth out into the open. Another part, the louder one, told me to wait. People revealed themselves when they thought they were safe. Over the next few days, I paid attention to things I had never noticed before. The way Evan always volunteered to grab the mail. The way he lingered near my desk when my laptop was open. The way he asked casual questions about my work schedule, what time I usually left, whether I had any days off coming up. "Just making conversation," he said once, smiling. I smiled back. At school, I called the credit bureaus and placed a freeze on my credit. The woman on the phone spoke quickly, like this was routine. Maybe it was. Maybe I was late. I checked my credit report that night. There were inquiries I did not recognize. Small ones, spread out, easy to miss if you were not looking for them. I took more screenshots. On Friday, I left work early and drove to the county recorder's office. The building was bland, low, surrounded by a parking lot that shimmered with heat. Inside, the air was cold and smelled faintly of paper. I waited my turn, heart pounding, and slid my ID across the counter. "I need a copy of a document filed against my property," I said. The clerk nodded and printed it without comment. She did this all day, every day. To her, I was just another name. I sat in my car and read the document again, this time holding it in my hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have. The notary stamp was clear. The date was one I remembered because it was a Thursday I had worked late. I had been at school until nearly 7 that night, helping a senior finish a scholarship application. There was an email to prove it. That was when I knew. Not suspected. Not wondered. Knew. Someone had signed my name while I was helping a kid plan a future I suddenly was not sure I still owned. That night, I did not eat dinner. I pretended I had a headache and went to bed early. Evan knocked on my door once, then went quiet. In the dark, I opened a new note on my phone. Dates, times, documents, questions. I titled it simply, Timeline. I did not know yet how far this went or who else was involved. I only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was happening in my life was not an accident, and I was done being the only one in the room who did not know the rules of the game. Once you know something is wrong, truly wrong, the world does not explode the way you expect it to. It narrows. The days after I opened that timeline on my phone felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had shifted inward by a few inches when I wasn't looking. Nothing dramatic happened. Evan did not confess. No police showed up at the door. The house stayed quiet, the same way it always had. That was the part that unsettled me the most. On Monday morning, Evan offered to make coffee. "You're out early today," he said, standing at the counter in one of my t-shirts, pouring grounds into the filter. "Staff meeting?" "Something like that," I replied. He handed me a mug. I noticed he had used my favorite one, the chipped blue ceramic I always reached for first. It was a small thing. It felt intentional. At work, I sat through the meeting without hearing most of it. My eyes kept drifting to the clock. Every minute felt accounted for now. I was hyper-aware of time in a way I had never been before. When I left my office, when I returned, how long my car sat in the driveway before the garage door closed. That afternoon, a junior named Marcus came in furious because his girlfriend had read his private messages and shared them with her friends. He paced my office, hands shoved into his pockets. "She had no right," he said. "She went behind my back." I nodded. "How did that make you feel?" "Stupid," he said immediately, like I didn't see it coming. After he left, I sat alone for a long moment, staring at the empty chair across from my desk. I resisted the urge to open my timeline again. I already knew what it would tell me. That evening, a letter from my mortgage company finally arrived in the mailbox. Not the notice of default, something else. A generic update about interest rates. Evan had brought the mail in before I got home. "Did anything important come?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Nope," he said. "Just junk." I nodded and went to my room, where I logged in to USPS, informed delivery again. There it was, scanned, delivered, the envelope I now held in my hand. The missing one was not missing at all. It had been intercepted. I added another note to my timeline. Mail inconsistency, no confrontation. On Tuesday, Evan mentioned he had a meeting. "With who?" I asked. "Just someone who knows someone," he said. "Business stuff." "What kind of business?" He shrugged. "You wouldn't be interested." He smiled when he said it, like a joke, but something in his eyes flicked away from mine too quickly. I watched him grab his keys and leave, the door closing softly behind him. I did not follow him. I did not need to. I had learned enough from years of sitting across from teenagers who lied badly that you never chased a story when it wanted to run. You let it think it was safe. I spent that evening organizing my files, old tax returns, mortgage statements, utility bills. I created a physical folder and a digital one. I labeled everything: dates, amounts, sources. I noticed things I had never paid attention to before. A forwarding confirmation email buried in my inbox from months ago. A bank alert I had dismissed because it was small. $20 here, $50 there. Nothing that would have alarmed me on its own. Together, it formed a pattern. On Wednesday, my credit monitoring app sent me another notification. Another inquiry, this one from a lender I had never heard of. I called immediately. "Yes, you applied online," the representative said after verifying my information. "I did not," I replied. There was a pause. "The application came from your IP address." My throat tightened. "Which address?" She read it out. "My home address." I thanked her and ended the call. I did not sit down. I walked the length of my office twice, then locked the door and leaned my forehead against it. That afternoon, I came home to find the mailbox camera back online. Evan was in the living room, tapping away on his laptop. "Camera's working again," he said casually. "Must have been the Wi-Fi." "Good," I replied. "I like having it." He looked up, just for a second. "You worry too much." That night, I pretended to fall asleep early. I turned off my lamp and lay still, listening. Around 11, I heard Evan's door open. Footsteps. The soft click of the back door. I waited until the sound faded, then rolled onto my side and opened the camera app. The feed showed him standing by the mailbox, phone in hand, light from the screen illuminating his face. He opened the box, took something out, slipped it into his pocket, and walked back inside. I saved the clip. I did not cry. I did not feel shocked. I felt confirmed. The next morning, I took a personal day. I did not tell Evan. I waited until he left, then drove to the library and logged into my accounts on a public computer. New passwords, two-factor authentication, credit freezes, fraud alerts. I printed copies of everything. In the afternoon, I sat in my car outside my house and watched Evan through the window as he paced, phone pressed to his ear. I could not hear what he was saying, but I could see his body language change. The way his shoulders tightened, the way he ran a hand through his hair. When he hung up, he slammed his phone down on the table. That was the moment I understood something else. This was not impulsive. This was not sloppy. This was not desperation in the way I had always framed Evan's mistakes. This was organized. That evening, he was in an unusually good mood. He ordered takeout, offered to pay, talked about plans. "Once this thing I'm working on goes through," he said, "everything's going to be easier." "What thing?" I asked. "You'll see," he said. "Just trust me." I smiled and nodded, the way I had taught myself to do. Inside, something hardened. I had spent years telling students that trust had to be earned, not assumed. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten to apply that rule at home. I went to bed that night knowing 3 things with absolute clarity. First, Evan had been handling my mail deliberately. Second, someone else was involved, someone who knew the system well enough to move quietly. Third, whatever they thought they were about to finish, they were already too late. Because I was no longer guessing, I was watching. The moment something stops being a suspicion and becomes a fact, your body reacts before your mind catches up. For me, it was a tightness right under my ribs, a steady pressure that did not go away no matter how slowly I breathed. Thursday morning, Evan left the house earlier than usual. He did not announce it. He did not make coffee. He just grabbed his keys and slipped out while I stood at the sink, pretending to rinse a mug that was already clean. As soon as the door closed, I opened my phone and checked the mailbox camera. The feed was live, clear, no glitches. Good, I thought. Let it work today. I drove to school, sat through 2 counseling sessions, and then excused myself during 3rd period with a headache I did not have. In the parking lot, I opened my laptop and pulled up the escrow email again. I read it slowly, line by line, the way I read transcripts when a student insisted a teacher had said something they could not prove. There was a phone number at the bottom I had not called yet. Not the general line, a direct one. I dialed it. "This is Darren," a man said. His voice was smooth, confident, practiced, the kind of voice that sounded comfortable being listened to. "Hi," I said. "I'm calling about the escrow appointment scheduled for tomorrow under my name." "Yes, Claire," he said without hesitation. "Everything's set. Just need your ID at signing." I swallowed. "Can you tell me who referred you?" There was a brief pause, barely noticeable. "A mutual contact." "I don't use mutual contacts," I said. "I use names." Another pause. Longer this time. "Well," he said lightly, "that's something we can discuss in person." "I won't be there," I said. His tone shifted, just enough. I'd hate for that to complicate things. "Things are already complicated," I replied. "You have paperwork on a house I am not selling." Silence. Then a quiet exhale, as if he were deciding which mask to put back on. "Claire," he said, slower now, "everything we have is authorized. You signed." I ended the call without replying. For a full minute, I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, my hands gripping it too tightly. Authorized. You signed. The words echoed in my head, calm and wrong. I drove straight to the county recorder's office again. This time, I asked to speak to a supervisor. She was a woman in her 50s, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She listened, without interrupting as I explained, then pulled the record up on her screen. "If this signature isn't yours," she said, tapping the monitor, "you need to file an affidavit of forgery immediately." "Can it be reversed?" I asked. She hesitated. "It can be challenged, but timing matters." Timing. Everything suddenly came down to timing. I left with a stack of forms and a knot in my stomach that felt permanent. On the way home, my phone buzzed again. Another USPS notification. Another scanned envelope. This one was thicker. Certified. I parked 2 houses down from mine and checked the camera feed. The mailbox sat closed. Ordinary, innocent. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. At exactly 2:47, Evan walked into frame. He opened the mailbox, pulled out the envelope, looked around, and tucked it under his arm. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He walked back into the house like it was his. I saved the clip. I did not scream. I did not cry. I drove away. I sat in the parking lot of a grocery store I did not shop at and opened the envelope image from Informed Delivery. It was from a lender, the same lender whose name I had seen on my credit report. Inside my car, the air smelled faintly of hot plastic. My phone felt slick in my hand. I called the lender. "Yes, your loan has been approved," the representative said cheerfully. "Funds will be dispersed after closing." "I did not apply for a loan," I said. There was a pause. "It's attached to your property, ma'am." I closed my eyes. "Cancel it." "I'm sorry," she replied. "At this stage, we can't cancel without a formal fraud report." I thanked her and hung up, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was the moment. Not the discovery of the deed. Not the missing mail. This. Someone was actively trying to take money out against my house, against my name, against my future, and they were close. I drove home as the sun dipped lower, turning the sky that harsh Arizona orange that always made everything look sharper than it really was. Evan was in the kitchen when I walked in, leaning against the counter, phone in hand. "Hey," he said. "You okay? You look tired." "I am," I replied. "Did anything come in the mail?" He shook his head. "Just junk." "It never buy." I nodded and went to my room, my legs steady even though my insides were shaking. I locked the door, sat on the floor, and spread the documents out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. The deed. The escrow email. The credit inquiries. The camera clips. I saw the shape of it then, finally. Not just Evan. Not just a betrayal of trust. This was a process. A sequence. A machine that worked because people like me did not expect it to be turned on us by someone we loved. I picked up my phone and opened my timeline. Thursday, 2:47 p.m. Certified mail intercepted. Thursday, 3:10 p.m. Lender confirms active loan process. Thursday, 3:22 p.m. Escrow contact confirms signature on file. My hand stopped shaking when I wrote it down. Facts had that effect on me. They always had. That night, Evan knocked on my door. "You've been distant," he said through the wood. "Did I do something?" I opened the door just enough to look at him. His face was open, concerned, almost hurt. If I had not seen the footage, if I had not heard Darren's voice on the phone, I might have believed him. "No," I said. "I'm just overwhelmed." He nodded slowly. "You know you can trust me, right?" I met his eyes. Of course. The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. After he went back to the living room, I called a number a colleague had given me months earlier and saved but never used. "A real estate attorney." She answered on the second ring. "I think someone is committing fraud using my identity," I said, "and I think I know who's helping them." "Do you have documentation?" she asked. "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "I have everything." "Good," she said, "because once money moves, this gets harder." When I hung up, the house felt different. Not smaller this time, but charged, like the air before a storm. I looked around at the walls, the furniture, the life I had built slowly and carefully. They thought they were finishing something. They had no idea I had just started. The first thing my attorney told me was not to confront anyone. "People make mistakes when they feel cornered," she said, "and mistakes can cost you leverage." Leverage was not a word I associated with my family, but it settled into my vocabulary quickly. Friday morning, I called in sick. It was the first time in years I had done that without actually being ill. My voice sounded strange even to me when I left the message, flat and controlled. I hung up before I could second-guess myself. At 8:15, I was sitting at my dining table with my laptop open, documents spread out around it. Sunlight came in through the blinds in thin stripes, cutting across the pages like lines on a map. I worked slowly, deliberately, the way I coach students through test questions when panic made them rush. One step at a time. I filed the affidavit of forgery online, uploading copies of my ID, the deed, and a sworn statement that my signature had been used without my consent. The language was blunt and unemotional. I appreciated that. There was comfort in facts stripped of feeling. Then I called the credit bureaus again, this time to confirm the freezes were active. Each representative verified my information and repeated the same warning. "If anyone tries to open new credit, it will be blocked." Good. I followed that by calling my bank. Fraud department. Long wait. Elevator music. I watched the mailbox camera feed while I waited, the image steady and boring. When a man finally came on the line, I explained everything from the beginning, keeping my voice calm, my words precise. "I believe someone with access to my home has compromised my accounts," I said. "I need to lock everything down." He asked questions. Dates, amounts. I answered them all. When he was done, he placed additional alerts on my accounts and walked me through changing credentials. "Do not share these with anyone," he said. "I won't," I replied, thinking how strange it was that I ever had. By noon, my phone was full of confirmation emails, fraud reports, case numbers, reference IDs. Each one felt like a small weight placed on my side of the scale. At one, I drove to a shipping store and rented a small mailbox under my name. No shared access, no forwarding. I updated my address with every institution that mattered. At 2, I sat in my car and took a deep breath. The world outside looked exactly the same as it had a week ago. Same strip malls, same heat, same people going about their business. Inside me, something had shifted permanently. Evan came home around 3. I heard his car before I saw it on the camera. He walked in with a grocery bag and a smile. "I brought lunch," he said. "Thought we could eat together." "That's nice," I replied. "I already ate." His smile faltered, just for a second. He recovered quickly. "You've been working a lot," he said. "You should slow down." "I can't," I said. "Not right now." He studied my face like he was trying to read something written too small. "You're acting weird." I shrugged. "Stress." He nodded, accepting the answer the way people accept things they do not want to examine too closely. That evening, I went for a walk around the block. The sky was beginning to cool, the sun lower, shadows stretching long across the sidewalks. I passed neighbors watering lawns, kids riding bikes, couples unloading groceries. I waved when someone waved first. Halfway around, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stopped walking. "Hello?" I answered. "Claire," Darren said. His voice was familiar now. "We need to talk." "No," I replied. He chuckled softly. "I think you misunderstand the situation." "I don't," I said. "And you shouldn't be calling me." There was a pause. "This can still be smooth," he said. "If you cooperate." "I know, love." I laughed then, a short sound that surprised me. "You filed forged documents against my property. Smooth is not on the table. You don't have proof," he said. "And dragging this out will only make things harder for you." "For who?" I asked. He did not answer. When the call ended, I stood there for a long moment, phone pressed to my ear, heart racing. Then I opened my notes app and added another entry. Friday, 6:18 p.m. Direct contact from escrow intermediary. Implicit threat. At home, Evan was in the shower. I moved quietly through the house, gathering things I had overlooked. My passport, my birth certificate, old tax records. I placed them in a lockbox and slid it under my bed. When Evan came out, towel around his waist, he looked relaxed, comfortable, like someone who believed the ground beneath him was solid. "You okay?" he asked again. "Yes," I said. That night, after he went to bed, I opened my laptop and reviewed everything one more time. Patterns emerged when I stopped looking at each incident in isolation. The timing of the credit inquiries matched Evan's days off. The missing mail coincided with his mornings home alone. The notary date fell on a night I worked late, a night he had known about. I thought about all the small questions he had asked me over the months. How much I owed, how long I planned to stay in the house, whether I had ever considered refinancing. I had answered without thinking. Why wouldn't I? He was my brother. I closed the laptop and sat back, staring at the ceiling. Saturday morning, I met my attorney in person. Her office was small and quiet, tucked into a building that looked like it had not been updated since the 90s. I liked that. It felt serious. She reviewed my documents carefully, her expression tightening as she went. "This isn't amateur," she said finally. "Someone knows exactly what they're doing." "What happens next?" I asked. "We stop the transfer," she said. "We notify the county, the lender, the title company. We create a paper trail so thick they can't move without leaving fingerprints." "And Evan?" I asked. She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "He's either a participant or a pawn." "I don't think he's a pawn," I said. She nodded slowly. "Then we wait." Waiting was not passive, I learned. It was active, focused, exhausting. It meant watching without reacting, listening without responding, letting people think they were ahead. That afternoon, Evan mentioned he had plans. "Meeting some people," he said. "Might be late." "Okay," I replied. He hesitated, then said, "You trust me, right?" I met his eyes. "I trust the truth." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't lie to myself anymore," I said. He laughed it off, but his shoulders were tight when he left. That night, I watched the mailbox camera as a car I did not recognize slowed near my house. A man stepped out, glanced around, then walked back to the car when he noticed the camera light was on. I saved the clip. In my timeline, the entries were starting to stack up, neat and methodical, evidence instead of emotion, structure instead of chaos. I realized then that whatever fear I had felt at the beginning had changed shape. It was still there, but it was sharper, cleaner, useful. They thought they were running a quiet operation. They thought family loyalty would keep me silent. They thought I would panic. What they did not understand was that my entire career had been built on seeing through panic, on slowing moments down until the truth could not hide behind noise. And now, they were operating inside my house, on my time, which meant they were already losing. By Sunday, the house felt like a stage set where everyone knew their lines except me. Or maybe I was the only one who knew them now. Evan slept late. I heard his alarm go off once, then again, then stop. When he finally came out of his room close to noon, he looked annoyed, like someone who had been interrupted in the middle of a plan. "You're up early," he said, glancing at the clock on the microwave. "I couldn't sleep," I replied. I was sitting at the dining table with my laptop open, a mug of cold coffee beside me. Too much on my mind. He nodded, pulled a chair out, then hesitated before sitting. That hesitation was new. It was small, but I saw it. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Everything's fine." The lie slid out easily now. That scared me more than anything else. I spent the afternoon doing ordinary things on purpose. Laundry, groceries, cleaning out the fridge. I needed Evan to see normalcy, to feel it, to relax inside it. People made mistakes when they felt safe. My attorney had been right. At the grocery store, I noticed Evan texting constantly, his phone never leaving his hand. When I asked who it was, he said, "Just someone from a job lead." "What kind of job?" I asked. "Real estate adjacent," he said with a shrug. "You wouldn't get it." That phrase again. "You wouldn't get it." I smiled. "Try me." He laughed and shook his head. "It's complicated." "Most things are," I said. That night, while Evan was in the shower, I opened the hallway closet and checked the small lockbox I had placed there earlier that week. Everything was intact. I locked it again and slid it back into place, my hands steady. I was no longer reacting. I was confirming. On Monday morning, I went back to work. Students filled my office with their usual chaos, their worries still loud and urgent, and for a few hours, I was grateful for the distraction. At lunch, I stepped outside to take a call from my attorney. "The title company has been notified," she said. "They've put a temporary hold on the transaction." My chest loosened slightly. "Temporary?" "Yes," she said. "Which means someone is going to push back." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Evan. "Hey, we need to talk tonight." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "Sure." When I got home, Evan was already there, pacing the living room. He stopped when he saw me, hands shoved into his pockets. "You've been making calls," he said. "Yes," I replied, setting my bag down. "I have." "To who?" he asked. "My bank. An attorney, the county recorder." His face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The easy confidence I was used to seeing slipped, replaced by something tighter, sharper. "Why?" he asked. "Because someone forged my signature," I said calmly. "And someone intercepted my mail." He laughed once, short and humorless. "You're being paranoid." "I'm being careful," I said. He stepped closer. "You think I'd do something like that to you?" I looked at him. Really looked. The familiar shape of his face, the scar on his chin from when we were kids, the eyes that had always looked a little restless, like he was waiting for something better to start. "I don't think," I said. "I know. I would know." The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. Evan's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting," he said. "This is nothing." "Nothing doesn't involve escrow," I replied. He flinched. "Just a flicker, gone almost immediately." "So you did see it," he said. "Yes," I replied. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a long breath. "Okay. Look, it's not what you think." "That's what people say when it's exactly what I think," I said. He laughed again, louder this time. "You always do this. You jump to conclusions. You think you're smarter than everyone else." "I am smarter than the paperwork you filed," I said, "and the cameras you forgot about." That did it. His shoulders slumped slightly, like he had dropped a weight he was tired of holding. "It was supposed to be temporary," he said. "Just a bridge." "A bridge to what?" I asked. "To fixing things," he snapped. "To getting ahead. You don't understand how hard it is starting from nothing." Here action of teengers. "You didn't start from nothing," I said. "You started from my house." His eyes flashed. "You've always had everything." I stared at him. "I worked for everything." "That's what you tell yourself," he said. "You don't see how lucky you are." Luck. The word landed wrong. "Did you sign my name?" I asked. He did not answer right away. "Did you sign my name?" I repeated. "Yes," he said finally, "but I had to. There wasn't time." "There's always time to not commit a felony," I said. He scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being factual." He turned away, pacing again. "You're not even using the equity. It's just sitting there." "It's my house," I said. "And my equity." He stopped and looked at me, eyes hard. "We're family. Family doesn't steal," I replied. He laughed bitterly. You think this was my idea? You think I just woke up one day and decided to screw you over? I stayed quiet. There are people involved, he said. People who know how this works. People who promised it would be clean. Clean for who? I asked. He did not answer. That was confirmation enough. I took a slow breath. You need to pack. His head snapped up. What? You need to leave, I said. Tonight. You can't kick me out, he said. This is my home too. No, I said. It isn't. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You do this, and you ruin everything. I didn't start this, I said. But I will finish it. For a moment, I thought he might say more. Might apologize. Might threaten me. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and keys and headed for the door. You think you've won, he said. You haven't. The door slammed behind him. I stood in the quiet living room, my heart pounding, my hands trembling now that I no longer had to hide it. I sank onto the couch and let myself feel it for exactly 1 minute. Fear, grief, anger, the loss of something I had thought was unbreakable. Then I stood up. I locked the doors. I checked the cameras. I opened my timeline and added the entry. Monday, 7:42 p.m. Admission of forgery. Witness, me. There was no going back now. The truth was out, at least between us. And somewhere outside my house, Evan was making calls to people who thought I was still confused, still hesitant, still willing to protect him because he was my brother. They were wrong. From this point on, I was no longer protecting him. I was protecting myself. Evan did not come back that night. I knew he wouldn't. People who leave in anger rarely return until they have rewritten the story in their heads. I slept in short stretches, waking every hour to check the cameras, the locks, my phone. Nothing moved. The house stayed quiet, but my mind did not. It kept replaying the same moments on a loop. His hesitation before sitting down, the way he said we're family, the calm in his voice when he admitted he had signed my name. By morning, exhaustion settled into my bones, heavy and dull. I made coffee anyway. Routine mattered. It reminded me that my life still had a structure, even if parts of it were cracking. At 7:30, my phone buzzed. We need to fix this, Evan texted. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. There is no fixing what's already been done. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You're blowing this up, he wrote. You're going to make things worse. I did not respond. At work, I went through the motions. Students talked, parents emailed. A vice principal stopped by to ask if I could sit in on a meeting later in the week. I nodded, took notes, smiled when expected. On the outside, I was the same Claire I had always been. Inside, something had shifted permanently. I was no longer waiting for clarity. I had it. During lunch, my attorney called. He contacted the title company this morning, she said. Tried to push the signing up. Did it work? I asked. No, she replied. The hold is holding, but this confirms what we suspected. They're rushing, I said. Yes, she agreed, which means they're nervous. That afternoon, Evan showed up at the house while I was still at work. I saw it on the camera feed. He stood on the porch, hands on his hips, looking at the door like it had personally offended him. He knocked once, then again, harder. I watched from my office, my phone balanced against my coffee mug. He tried his key. It did not work. I had changed the locks early that morning. He stepped back, pulled out his phone, and called me. I let it ring. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, a slow, almost amused smile. He looked straight at the camera and shook his head, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. That smile stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. When I got home, his things were gone. The shoes by the door, the backpack, the spare charger he always forgot. The house looked cleaner, emptier, lighter. On the kitchen counter, he had left a folded piece of paper. You're making a mistake, it read. These people don't play fair. I threw it away without rereading it. That evening, my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. This is Detective Morales, a man said when I answered. I'm calling regarding a fraud report filed under your name. Asabelt. Yes, I said. Thank you for calling. He asked me to come in the next morning. Bring documentation, everything I had. I packed a bag that night like I was preparing for an exam. Copies of the deed, screenshots, camera clips, my timeline, printed and organized. I did not include emotion. I included facts. At the station, Detective Morales listened carefully, flipping through my binder, nodding occasionally. You did the right thing by not confronting him sooner, he said. People escalate when they panic. I know, I replied. That's why I waited. He looked at me for a moment, then said, There's more here than just your brother. Yes, I said. I know. He leaned back. We've been tracking a group operating in this county. Title fraud, identity manipulation. They target properties without recent activity. Owners who look stable, predictable. That sounds flattering, I said flatly. They often use someone close to the victim, he continued. Family, roommates, anyone with access. I nodded. He wasn't acting alone. No, Morales agreed. And that's where this gets complicated. When I left the station, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, I answered. Claire, Darren said. He did not bother pretending this time. You went to the police. Yes, I said. That was a mistake, he replied calmly. This didn't have to get ugly. It already is, I said. You're putting your brother in a very bad position, he said. You should think about that. I am, I replied. That's why I'm doing this. He exhaled slowly. You don't understand how these things work. I understand exactly how they work, I said. You count on silence, on shame, on family loyalty. Silence stretched between us. You're smart, he said finally. Smart people usually choose the path of least damage. I am choosing it, I replied. Just not for you. In Nauerveld. I hung up and immediately wrote down the time, the number, the exact wording he had used. Threats rarely sounded like threats when people wanted plausible deniability. That night, Evan showed up again. Not at the house, at my parents' place. My mother called me, her voice tight. He says you're trying to destroy him. I'm telling the truth, I said. He's scared, she said. He says he didn't have a choice. I know, I replied. And I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. I nut. There was a pause. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I said. I'm sure. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time without starting the engine. Family had always been my weak spot. The place where my boundaries blurred, where logic softened. But this was no longer just about me. The next morning, Detective Morales called again. We're moving faster than expected, he said. Your documentation helped. A lot. What happens now? I asked. We're going to invite some people in for conversations, he said. Including your brother. My stomach tightened. And me? You'll be asked to make a choice, he said. Not today, but soon. After the call ended, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the empty chair where Evan used to sit. I thought about every time I had stepped in to soften the consequences of his actions, every excuse I had made, every line I had crossed in the name of family. Those choices had led us here. Whatever decision was coming next would define not just what happened to Evan, but who I was willing to be when the story ended. And for the first time since this began, I understood something clearly. This was no longer about saving my house. It was about breaking a pattern that had been handed down quietly, one apology at a time, and I was done carrying it. Once the police are involved, time changes its texture. It stops feeling personal and starts feeling procedural, measured in calls returned, documents requested, windows of opportunity that open and close whether you are ready or not. Detective Morales called me twice that week. Short calls, precise questions. Did Evan ever mention an LLC? Did you recognize any of these names? Do you know who notarized this document? Each answer I gave filled in another square on a board I could not see. On Thursday afternoon, he asked me to come back to the station. We want to walk through the timeline with you in person, he said. There are a few things we need you to hear directly. I took another personal day. At school, I told my assistant principal I had a family matter. He did not press. People rarely do when your voice is steady enough. At the station, Morales and a woman from the county attorney's office met me in a small conference room. There was a pitcher of water on the table and a stack of papers turned face down. Morales slid one of them toward me. "Does this look familiar?" he asked. It was a copy of the quitclaim deed. But this version had notes in the margins. Arrows, highlighted sections. "The notary stamp," he continued, "belongs to a remote notary service based out of Nevada." I frowned. "I've never used a remote notary." "Neither have most people," the woman said. "That's why it works." She flipped another page. "The IP address used to submit the notarization request matches the one used to apply for the loan." "My house," I said. "Yes," Morales replied, "but not your device." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Evan's laptop." "That's our assumption," Morales said. "We're waiting on confirmation." The woman leaned forward. "We believe your brother was the access point, not the architect." I nodded slowly. That fit what I had already sensed. "He was recruited," she continued. "Someone identified him as close to you, financially unstable, and willing to rationalize." I thought about Evan's words. It was supposed to be temporary, just a bridge. "A bridge to where?" I murmured. She looked at me carefully. "To people who promised him relief." End quote. They showed me photos next. Surveillance stills from other neighborhoods. Men pulling mail from boxes. Doors knocked on politely. Smiles offered. "This group has hit at least 6 properties in the last year," Morales said. "Mostly single owners. Mostly people with stable jobs and good credit." "Why hasn't anyone stopped them?" I asked. "They operate in gray areas," he replied. "By the time victims realize what's happening, the money's moved." "But not this time," the woman said. "No," I agreed. "Not this time." When I got home, Evan was waiting in his car across the street. He did not approach. He just watched as I pulled into my driveway, his headlights cutting off when I turned my engine off. I did not look at him. Inside, I locked the door, checked the cameras, and leaned against the wall for a moment. My legs felt weak, like I had run farther than I realized. My phone buzzed. "They talked to me," Evan texted. "You didn't have to do this." I closed my eyes. "I did," I typed back, "because you would have kept going." There was no immediate response. An hour later, my mother called. "He came here," she said quietly. "He's crying, Claire. He says he's trapped." "Did he say by who?" I asked. "Yes," she said, but not clearly. "Mom," I said gently, "you can love him without protecting him from consequences." She sighed. "I know. I just wish it hadn't come to this." "So do I," I said. And I meant it. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept returning to one thing Morales had said. "You'll be asked to make a choice." I wondered what choice could possibly exist at this point. Evan had committed a crime. Darren and his people were predators. The system would do what it did. I underestimated how messy justice could be when blood was involved. The next morning, Morales called again. "We need you to come in," he said. "With your attorney, if you want." "What's happened?" I asked. "Your brother is cooperating," he said. "Partially." That word lodged in my chest. "He admitted to accessing your accounts," Morales continued. "He admitted to signing your name, but he's minimizing his role." "And the others?" I asked. "Darren's lawyered up," Morales said. "No statements, no cooperation." I exhaled slowly. "So Evan's the weak link." "Yes," Morales replied. "And that's where your choice comes in." At the station, they laid it out plainly. If Evan refused to testify, the case against Darren would rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, strong but not airtight. Darren would likely walk with a reduced charge or a settlement that meant very little real consequence. If Evan testified fully, named names, explained the process, and turned over his communications, the county could pursue felony charges, not just against Darren, but against the entire operation. "What happens to Evan?" I asked. The woman from the county attorney's office did not soften her answer. "He would still face charges, but cooperation would be considered." I nodded. "And if he doesn't cooperate?" Then he becomes the primary defendant, she said, and Darren disappears into the system. I closed my eyes. They were asking me to decide how much of the truth I was willing to let be told. I asked for time. That afternoon, Evan called me. Not texted, called. I messed up, he said as soon as I answered. His voice sounded small, younger. Like the kid who used to follow me around the house asking questions I didn't have answers to. Yes, I said. You did. I didn't know it would go this far, he said. They told me it was legal, that you'd never notice. I noticed, I said. They said I could pay it back, he continued, words tumbling over each other. That once the loan went through, I'd fix everything. You fix a hole by digging deeper? I asked. He was quiet. I'm scared, he said finally. They're not like you. They don't just walk away. I closed my eyes, the weight of his fear pressing against my own. I can't protect you, I said, but I can tell you what protecting yourself actually looks like. What? He whispered. Telling the whole truth, I said. Not the version that makes you look better. The real one. There was a long pause. If I do that, he said slowly, you're still not going to forgive me, are you? Forgiveness. The word sat between us, heavy and complicated. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but this isn't about forgiveness. It's about stopping this from happening again. To you, he said. To anyone, I corrected. He exhaled shakily. What do I have to do? When the call ended, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the same walls I had painted myself years earlier. I thought about the choice in front of me. I could let the system grind forward without my interference, watch Evan take the fall while the people who taught him how to do this slipped away. Or I could insist on something harder, something that didn't feel like revenge or mercy. Accountability, not just for Evan, for everyone who thought my silence was guaranteed. I picked up my phone and called Detective Morales back. He'll testify, I said, fully. Morales was quiet for a moment. And you? He asked. I'll back it up with everything I have, I said, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. When I hung up, the house was silent again. But it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a line had been drawn. And this time, it wasn't just about what had been taken from me. It was about what I was no longer willing to give. The day everything went public did not begin with sirens or shouting. It began with an email reminder. Neighborhood Association monthly meeting. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Community Center. I stared at it longer than I should have. I had missed the last 2 meetings. Work had been busy. Life had been loud. Normally, I would have deleted the reminder without a second thought. This time, I forwarded it to my attorney and Detective Morales. He'll be there, Morales replied a few minutes later. So will his guy. I did not ask how he knew. By that point, I had learned not to underestimate how much people talked when they thought no one important was listening. The hours leading up to the meeting crawled. At school, I struggled to focus. A senior asked me to review a financial aid appeal letter, and I caught myself reading the same sentence 3 times without absorbing it. I apologized, blamed a headache, asked if we could finish later. At 4, I went home and changed. Nothing dramatic. Jeans, a plain blouse, hair pulled back. I wanted to look like what I was, a homeowner attending a neighborhood meeting. Not a victim, not a witness, just someone who belonged there. Before I left, I opened my folder one last time. Copies of the deed, the forged signature, screenshots of messages, camera stills, my timeline, neatly printed. It fit inside a manila envelope, the edges worn soft from handling. The community center was already half full when I arrived. Folding chairs lined up in uneven rows, a long table at the front held name placards, a pitcher of water, a stack of pamphlets about property taxes and fire safety. I took a seat near the aisle. Around me, neighbors chatted about potholes and barking dogs, about the heat and the upcoming holidays. Familiar faces, ordinary complaints. Then I saw him. Darren sat near the front, leaning back in his chair, one ankle resting on his knee. He looked comfortable, confident, like someone who had done this many times before. Next to him sat a man I recognized from the surveillance photos Morales had shown me. Different haircut, same posture. Evan arrived a few minutes later. and slipped into a chair near the back. He did not look at me. His shoulders were hunched, his foot tapping rapidly against the floor. The meeting started on time. HOA updates, budget discussions, a brief presentation about wildfire preparedness. I listened, nodded when appropriate, raised my hand once to vote on a minor landscaping change. Normal, boring, safe. Then the HOA president cleared her throat. "We also have a guest tonight," she said. "Darren Holt has asked to say a few words about some opportunities available to homeowners in our area." Darren stood, straightening his jacket, smiling easily. "Thank you for having me," he said. "I specialize in helping homeowners access the value they've built, especially in times when flexibility matters." He spoke smoothly, casually, about options, about solutions, about helping people who were asset-rich and cash-tight. He never used words like loan or debt. He said bridge. He said temporary. He said relief. I felt Evan shift behind me. Darren gestured toward a stack of pamphlets on the table. "No pressure," he said. "Just information." End quote. When he finished, polite applause followed. A few neighbors leaned forward, curious. One older woman whispered something to her husband. I stood up. The room went quiet in a way that felt immediate and physical, like a switch being flipped. "Hi," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "My name is Claire Morgan. I live on Ridgeview Drive." A few heads nodded. People recognized me. "I have a question," I continued, looking directly at Darren. "Can you explain why your company filed a deed transfer on my house using a forged signature?" The silence that followed was absolute. Darren blinked once. Smiled again, slower this time. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said. I walked to the front of the room. I placed the manila envelope on the table and opened it. "This is the deed recorded against my property 2 weeks ago," I said, holding it up. "This is my signature. I did not sign it." Murmurs rippled through the room. "And this," I continued, placing another page down, "is the notary record linked to that document, submitted from my home IP address while I was at work." Darren's smile faltered. I did not look at him. I looked at the room. "I work as a school counselor," I said. "I help students understand consequences. Tonight, I'm asking for the same thing." I turned to Evan then. He stood slowly, his face pale, hands shaking. "I signed it," he said. His voice cracked, but he did not stop. "She didn't know. They told me it was legal." Gasps. Someone said, "Oh my God." Darren took a step forward. "This is inappropriate," he said sharply. "This is not the place." "It is exactly the place," I said. "You came here to sell trust." I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. I pressed play. Darren's voice filled the room, calm and familiar. "This can still be smooth, if you cooperate." A neighbor near the front stood up. "Is this recorded?" "Yes," I said, "and it's already been provided to law enforcement." The doors at the back of the room opened. Detective Morales walked in with another officer. They did not rush. They did not raise their voices. They stood and waited. Darren's face drained of color. "Mr. Holt," Morales said calmly, "we need to speak with you." "This is a misunderstanding," Darren said, backing away. "It's a pattern," Morales replied, "and tonight you confirmed it." Evan sank back into his chair, head in his hands. Neighbors whispered. Someone asked if they should leave. The HOA president looked like she might faint. I stood there, hands resting on the table, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break my ribs. This was it, the moment everything tipped. Morales gestured toward Evan. "And you," he said gently, "we'll talk after." Evan nodded, tears sliding silently down his face. As Darren was escorted out, he looked at me one last time. There was no anger in his expression, no hatred, only calculation. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "I did." After they left, the room erupted into noise. Questions, shock, concern, people asking if their homes were safe. I answered what I could. I told them to check their records, to watch their mail, to be careful with who they trusted. When the meeting finally ended, I walked outside into the cooling night air. The parking lot lights hummed softly. Crickets chirped somewhere beyond the building. Evan approached me slowly. "I told them everything," he said. "Like you asked." "I know," I replied. "Are you still going to testify?" he asked, voice small. "Yes," I said. "So are you." He nodded, swallowing hard. As I drove home, the streets looked the same as they always had, but something fundamental had changed. What had been happening in the shadows was now visible. And once people see the truth in the open, it can never go back to hiding. Not for them. Not for me. The days after the meeting moved fast, as if the truth itself had picked up momentum and refused to slow down. By Friday morning, my phone was full of voicemails I did not have the energy to listen to yet. Neighbors. Unknown numbers. A woman from 2 streets over asking if I could explain what had happened because her husband was panicking. I returned the calls that mattered and let the rest sit. Silence, I had learned, was a tool. At school, word spread quietly. Not the details, just the shape of it. A few colleagues gave me careful looks, the kind people give when they know something serious has happened but are not sure how close they are allowed to stand. I appreciated that. I needed normalcy more than sympathy. Detective Morales called mid-morning. "We executed a search warrant," he said. "We seized devices and records from Holt's office." "Did you find anything?" I asked. "Enough," he replied. "More than enough." End quote. That afternoon, Evan was formally interviewed again, this time with his attorney present. Morales told me later that Evan did not try to minimize anything. He answered every question. He handed over passwords, email chains, contact lists. He named names. When Morales said that, I felt something unexpected loosen in my chest. Not relief, not forgiveness. Completion. The county recorder moved quickly. A notice of dispute was filed against my property, freezing any further transactions. The fraudulent deed was flagged. My title insurance carrier opened a claim and assigned an investigator who spoke in bullet points and timelines, not opinions. "Your ownership will be restored," she told me. "It's just paperwork now." Just paperwork. I clung to those words. On Saturday, I met with my attorney again. She spread documents across her desk, tapping specific sections with her pen. "They're charging him with multiple counts," she said. "Forgery, identity theft, conspiracy, tenders," end quote. "And Evan?" I asked. She paused. "Your brother is being charged as well. Reduced counts, contingent on cooperation." I nodded. "I expected that. You should know," she added. "This could have gone very differently. If you hadn't acted when you did, if you hadn't documented everything." "I know," I said. That evening, I went home alone. For the first time in weeks, the house felt quiet in a way that wasn't tense. Just quiet. I walked through each room, touching things I had chosen years earlier. The couch I had saved up for, the framed photo from my first year as a counselor, the dent in the hallway wall from when Evan and I had wrestled as kids and my mother had yelled at us to stop. I stood in front of the front door and locked it, then unlocked it, then locked it again. I replaced the deadbolt with a new one, turning the key slowly, deliberately. On Sunday, Evan called. "They're charging him," he said. I could hear the weight of it in his voice. "Yes," I replied. "They're charging me too." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm scared." "I know," I said. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" he asked. The question landed heavier than all the legal language had. "I don't know," I said honestly, "and that's not something I can promise you." Another pause. "I deserve that," he said quietly. When the call ended, I sat on the back step and watched the sun dip behind the houses, the sky turning the soft pink that only lasted a few minutes. I thought about how many times I had stepped in front of Evan, how often I had softened consequences for him without even realizing it. This time, I had not. The arraignment happened on Tuesday morning. I did not attend. My attorney did. Morales sent me a brief text afterward. Holt pled not guilty. Evan pled as advised. I exhaled slowly and returned to my work. By the end of the week, the neighborhood felt different. People waved more. They talked more. A few stopped me while I was walking to thank me, awkward and sincere. "We checked our records," one man said. Something wasn't right. "I'm glad you caught it," a woman added. You probably saved us. I nodded, accepted their gratitude, but it didn't settle in the way they might have expected. I hadn't done this to be thanked. I had done it because I could not live in a world where staying quiet felt easier than telling the truth. Friday afternoon, Morales called one last time before the weekend. There's something you should know, he said. Holt's been talking. I closed my office door. About what? About others, he replied. He's trying to bargain, but your brother got there first. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. So this stops with him, I said. It doesn't stop, Morales corrected. But it slows, and people notice. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time. I thought about Evan sitting in a holding room somewhere, answering questions he had avoided his entire life. I thought about Darren Holt, finally facing consequences he had counted on other people absorbing. That night, I cooked dinner for one. I ate at the table, not on the couch. I washed the dishes immediately, instead of letting them sit. I opened a window and let the air move through the house. The house was mine again. Not just legally, emotionally. A week later, I received confirmation from the county. The fraudulent deed had been nullified. My name, and only my name, sat on the title. I read the letter twice. There was no rush of triumph, no sense of victory the way movies promised. There was just a deep, steady calm. I had protected what was mine, not by yelling, not by threatening, but by refusing to pretend that love required self-destruction. As I filed the letter away, I realized something else. The hardest part of all of this had not been losing my sense of safety. It had been letting go of the version of myself who believed that if I just loved harder, tried longer, explained better, things would work out. That version of me had kept the peace. This version of me had kept the truth. And in the end, only one of those could actually protect a future. By the time I turned out the lights that night, I knew the worst of it was over. What remained was the aftermath. And that, I was finally ready to face. People think the hardest part comes when the truth is exposed. They are wrong. The hardest part comes afterward, when the noise fades and you are left alone with what your choices have changed and what they have not. Evan was released on conditional terms 3 days after the arraignment. No contact with me, no access to my property, mandatory check-ins. A restitution plan that looked overwhelming on paper, and even worse in reality. When my attorney explained it, she used neutral language, the kind designed to keep emotions out of the room. He agreed to cooperate fully, she said. That's why he's not in custody. And Darren? I asked. Still fighting, she replied. But the case against him is stronger now. Much stronger. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like weight shifting from one place to another. I started getting emails from people I did not know. Some were neighbors, some were not. A retired couple across town thanked me for saying something before it was too late. A woman my mother's age wrote to tell me she had almost signed paperwork with someone who sounded exactly like Darren. I read every message. I answered some, others I saved without responding. Each one was a reminder that this story was bigger than my house, bigger than my family, and that knowledge complicated everything. On Wednesday afternoon, Detective Morales asked if I would come in again. There's been a development, he said. At the station, he did not sit across from me this time. He sat beside me, a subtle shift that told me more than his words. Your brother's testimony is critical, he said. He knows the mechanics, the pitch, the pressure points. I know, I said. But, he continued, he's hesitating. I turned to look at him. About what? About naming someone higher up, Morales said. Someone who insulated Holt. Someone with resources. I haven't, and if he doesn't? I asked. Morales did not answer right away. Then Holt takes the fall partially, and the structure survives. I stared at the wall in front of us, the paint chipped near the corner. You told me I'd be asked to make a choice, I said quietly. Yes, Morales replied. This is it. The choice was not whether Evan would testify. He already had. The choice was whether I would allow something else. Leverage. Evan's attorney called me that night. He's willing to go further, she said carefully, but he's afraid. Of what? I asked. Retaliation, she said, and losing whatever chance he has left to rebuild. I laughed once, a short sound that surprised us both. Rebuild what? There was a pause. His life, she said. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the light above me humming softly. I thought about Evan at 12, following me around the house, asking questions. I thought about Evan at 25, promising this time was different. I thought about the man I had seen at the HOA meeting, shoulders shaking as he told the truth in front of people who would never forget his face. Justice, I was learning, was not clean. It did not come in neat lines or simple endings. It asked for things back. The next morning, I met Evan at his attorney's office. Not alone, with lawyers present, with boundaries in place. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner, older. "I'm not here to comfort you," I said as soon as we sat down. "I'm here to be clear." He nodded. "I know. If you're going to do this," I continued, "you do it all the way. No half-truths, no protecting people who don't deserve it." He swallowed. "If I name him, everything changes." "Yes," I said. "For everyone." His hands trembled slightly. "They told me I'd be safe if I kept my mouth shut." "They lied," I said. "They always do." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Why are you doing this?" The question surprised me. "Because if you don't," I said, "someone else will lose their house, or their retirement, or their sense of reality, and you'll carry that forever." He nodded slowly. "And you?" "I'll carry this either way," I said. "The difference is what it becomes." When he agreed, it was not dramatic. No tears, no speeches, just a quiet, exhausted nod. The fallout was immediate. Within 48 hours, subpoenas went out, phones were seized, accounts were frozen. Names I had never heard before started appearing in documents I was now allowed to see. The scope of it made my stomach turn. Morales called me on Friday evening. "You did the right thing," he said. "I hope so," I replied. "You stopped something," he said. "That matters." The restraining order was finalized the following week. Permanent, necessary, clean. Evan was not allowed within 100 yards of me or my home. The language was clinical, unemotional, and absolute. I signed without hesitation. That night, I stood in my living room, the windows open, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. A dog barked. A car door slammed. Life continuing. I thought about forgiveness then, the way people like to talk about it like a finish line, a thing you reached and crossed and left behind. I realized something important. Forgiveness was not required for accountability. Love was not a justification for harm. And protecting myself was not the same thing as being cruel. Evan sent me one last message through his attorney. "I'm sorry," it said. "I know that doesn't fix anything." I read it once, then again. Then I closed the email. Some apologies arrive too late to restore what was lost. That does not make them meaningless. It just makes them insufficient. On Sunday morning, I walked through my house again, the way I had after the locks were changed. This time, I noticed different things. The quiet felt earned. The space felt honest. I sat at the table where so many decisions had been made and opened my calendar for the coming week. Meetings, students, ordinary things. The extraordinary part was over. What remained was the work of living with the truth, without softening it, without rewriting it to make anyone more comfortable. I did not know if I would ever have a relationship with Evan again. I did not know what the final sentences would be. I did not know how long the echoes of this would last. What I did know was this. I had chosen to stop the damage instead of hiding it. I had chosen to protect strangers instead of preserving a lie. I had chosen a future that did not depend on my silence. And that choice, more than any document or court ruling, was the one that changed everything. The last document arrived on a plain Tuesday, months after everything had stopped feeling urgent. It came in the mail, addressed to me, signed for by me, placed directly into my hands. I stood in the entryway for a long moment before opening it, noticing how natural that simple act felt again. No scanning, no checking the camera, no second-guessing the path it had taken to reach me. Inside was the final notice from the county. The case against Darren Holt had been formally consolidated with several others, multiple defendants, multiple charges. The language was dense, legal, unemotional. What mattered was the line near the bottom. This concludes the matter as it pertains to the affected property owner, Claire Morgan. I sat down on the stairs and let the paper rest in my lap. Concludes. It was strange how small that word felt after how large everything else had been. Evan's sentencing came a few weeks later. I did not attend. I had been asked if I wanted to submit a statement. I declined. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. I had already said everything that mattered. My attorney called me afterward. He's been ordered into a long-term compliance program, she said. Restitution, monitoring, mandatory employment reporting. He'll be living with the consequences for a long time. That's appropriate, I replied. She hesitated. You know he mentioned you. Said your decision forced him to face things he never would have otherwise. I closed my eyes briefly. I hope that's true. After the call, I went back to work. Life had returned to its rhythms. Bells rang. Students argued about grades. Parents worried. College deadlines loomed. I sat across from teenagers every day and talked about accountability, about choices, about how the hardest decisions were rarely the loud ones. One afternoon, a senior named Alex stayed behind after a session. My uncle keeps asking me to sign stuff for him, he said. Says it's no big deal. What does your gut say? I asked. That it is, he said. I nodded. Then listen to it. He smiled, relieved, and left. That was when I realized something I hadn't expected. The story hadn't ended when the paperwork did. It had threaded itself quietly into who I was now, into the way I listened, the way I paused, the way I recognized certain patterns before they had time to do damage. At home, the house felt fully mine again. Not just because the title said so, but because nothing inside it required vigilance anymore. I rearranged furniture. I repainted the guest room. I donated the old couch Evan had slept on. One evening, I stood in the doorway of that room and thought about how easily I had confused access with trust. I did not make that mistake again. Neighbors still stopped me sometimes, not as often now. The shock had faded into memory. But once in a while, someone new would approach me at the grocery store or while I was walking the block. You're the one who spoke up, they'd say. I would nod. They would thank me, and I would say the same thing every time. Just check your paperwork, I'd tell them, and trust your instincts. It was enough. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sat on my back step with a cup of coffee, watching the light move slowly across the yard. The air was cooler than it had been months ago, winter edging into Phoenix in its subtle way. I thought about the version of myself who had opened her door without hesitation, who believed that love meant making room, no matter the cost. I did not judge her. She had been doing the best she could with the information she had. But she was gone now. In her place was someone who understood that boundaries were not punishments. They were protections. Not just against others, but against the parts of ourselves that wanted to smooth over what should never be smoothed. I did not get the ending people like to imagine. There was no reunion, no tearful reconciliation, no moment where everything felt repaired. What I got was something quieter, a life where my safety did not depend on my silence, a home that no longer required vigilance to feel secure, a future built on truth, even when that truth was uncomfortable. And somewhere, I knew. Evan was beginning a life shaped by consequences instead of excuses. I did not need to be part of that to know it mattered. The last thing I did that afternoon was file the final document into the folder labeled Closed. I slid it onto the shelf and stood there for a moment, hand resting on the spine. Then I turned away. Some stories end with justice. Some end with forgiveness. This one ended with something else. Clarity. And once you have that, everything you thought was solid but wasn't finally falls away, leaving only what can actually hold you up.